Vampires do not have a good track record on this channel. Don't know what I'm talking about? Then boy, do I have a series of videos for you. It's about time they got some love, and what better way to do that than by tapping into the most overpowered version of the character that first came to my mind. Can you beat Skyrim as a vampire lord? The vampire lord is basically the bloodsucker's response to the werewolf transformation. An install super that lets you get skinny little wings capable of somehow lifting your entire weirdly muscular frame, new spells that may have never been officially playtested, and, best of all, a new set of fingernails that would make Howard Hughes blush. All around, just a solid set of abilities that will more than likely trivialise most encounters in the entirety of Skyrim. If I know this, then why am I humouring the idea? Well, games are meant to be enjoyed, and this sounds very fun to mess with. Plus, I already made a similar run with the aforementioned werewolf mode, so this was bound to become a video at some stage. Like that run, the snags in this one will probably have to do with me transforming in areas with allies, as they will no doubt try to kill me once they see what I am, but it is Skyrim, so I'm sure there will be some kind of workaround. Now, with all that out of the way, let's begin. Alright, race selection, and never have I picked to be a dark elf so fast in my entire life. Vampires have a weakness to fire that only gets worse the longer they go without chowing down on some blood, so naturally picking the race that already starts with a 50% resistance to all fire hazards should let us survive longer in situations where we are set ablaze. I'm mainly worried about dragon fights, if it wasn't clear. Breton wouldn't have been the worst choice, as they just get a flat magic resistance, so they could be better for an overall tank, I suppose. Oh well, maybe next time. As for now, I pick a wonderfully idiotic name, sit through the unskippables, and then watch in real time as Alduin accidentally sets in motion the chain of events that will lead to his death. I choose to escape with Hadvar since you get the key for the gate, which just allows me to run on by all the Stormcloaks and not have to wait while Hadvar slowly deals with them. That said, I am taking some time to grab items that I believe may be of some value, as I need to have at least 520 gold to set my plan for getting the Vampire Lord form as soon as possible into motion. After I have sufficiently looted the Burning Stone City, I continue with the tutorial as normal, all the way up until being heavily railroaded into Riverwood. The sole exception this time being that for once in my life I did not take one of the starting standing stones. There is literally no point. Outside of skills like speech and maybe sneak and lockpicking, we will not be aiming to level up at all. By pawning off the last remains of Helgen to Alvor and Lucan, I secured just over 550 gold, with which I spent 90% off immediately as I pay for a taxi to Riften, followed by employing the services of Mercurio once more. Yeah, taking another note out of the playbook of my werewolf run, we will need a follower briefly to get us through a quest before we have access to the form. Last time I took Mercurio simply because he is a mage and tends to output a lot of damage in the early game. We are taking him for a similar reason this time, particularly for his love of casting Firebolt at anything in a 50-foot radius. Why? Well, by heading east of Riften we can enter Dayspring Canyon and arrive at the Dawnguard's HQ. Typically, you're not told to come here until Durak tracks you down like an aggressive stalker once you reach level 10. However, if you arrive here yourself, you can begin the quest long before the orc even gets a whiff of you. That said, the quests still seem to be somewhat skilled for the player, as if they had a few levels under their belt, but again, that's where our mage friend comes in. After speaking with the man that reminds me a little too much of Dad of War Kratos, we are gifted some firewood and then directed to Dim Hollow Crypt to investigate and promptly put down some vampires. And now you understand why we brought the Pyromaniac along. He is going to just melt through the vampires while we stand back and potentially roast marshmallows on their smouldering remains. The first room was surprisingly the most difficult, not because of the vampires, but actually the Deathhounds. They seemed oddly tanky when compared to everything else. Now would probably be a good time to mention that the difficulty is on Expert. Like I said, the transformations are stupidly strong, so I figured bumping things up would help alleviate enemies being far too squishy. Also figured I won't be leveling much, don't see myself getting higher than 5 if I'm honest, and while enemies don't scale as hard as in Oblivion, they do still grow with you. In other words, I'll be fighting trash mobs for the majority of the base game's main quest if I had to guess. We can deal with that when the time comes, as for now I just dance around the cave while Mercurio turns its residents into makeshift torches to light the way. The final vampire, Lokil, who should have put up more of a fight, is lit up like the rest of his brood, allowing me to safely engage in the random connect the dots puzzle that leads us to freeing Serana. Or wife, as most of the online fanbase seems to refer to her as. There's a few more encounters with some gargoyles and Draugr before we exit the cave, but considering I now have 2 powerful followers backing me up, well, I think the footage speaks for itself. Taking Serana home like the good little chauffeur that I am, I began just swimming northwest as I didn't exactly have any nearby locations to fast travel to. Things got a little funky at points, but we made it there before long. Before entering the vampire's overcompensating castle, I do dismiss Mercurio as I won't require his services anymore. Serana, on the other hand, well, we are basically joined at the hip until I finish the DLC, so she's going to be tagging along for the foreseeable future. Speaking with Harkon, and we agree to become a vampire lord, and as such, can finally defend ourselves. Much like the werewolf form, we have our own set of perks that we gain access to as we feed. Specifically by killing things with a health drain spell on our right hand, or by performing a takedown animation on a human enemy. I'll say it right now, that takedown is fickle as hell, so I mainly stuck to using the spell to get my perks. Don't get me wrong, it works every now and then, all you must do is kill a humanoid enemy with a heavy attack, but sometimes you just slap them silly instead and lose out on the progress to the next perk. Plus that health drain works on any creature so long as they aren't undead. Plus it's a ranged attack, meaning it's just a lot more versatile. We get to test out all of this as our first objective is to head on over to Redwater Den and fill the Bloodstone Chalice. While, yes, there are many things to drain at the Den, what I am mainly referring to is the guards and NPCs in the vicinity near Riften. It was my closest point to the Den, so I fast travelled there and was so excited to test out the Lord form that I transformed close enough for half the town to want me dead. The majority get their life force snuffed out by the health drain in a couple of shots. I tried to use the claws a little bit, but it's very clear that until I get a few more perks to increase their damage, they are just not going to be that much of a viable option. Case in point, trying to fight one guard up close and personal very nearly gets me skewered. Again, the spell just reigns supreme as I pop it a few times after being on death's door, and before you know it, I am in peak tip-top shape once again. Better yet, once I finish off the guard, I get my first Vampire Lord perk point. For now, the only one we have access to is Power of the Grave, which gives us an extra 50 points in health, magicka, and stamina. Not winning any points for originality, but it'll help me not get dissected by the next guard I come across, so I can't complain. Goes without saying, but one of my goals for this run is to fill out that perk tree before the end. Considering I am blasting anything that even remotely looks in my general direction with the Soul Suck Supreme, I cannot see a world where I do not achieve that goal. Making it to the Den and the rampage ensues. Well, after I revert back to base form to run through some doorways. Yeah, much like other creature runs such as the Folly 4 Deathclaw and whatnot, I have to keep popping back and forth to be able to fit through certain areas. At the very least, the Vampire Lord doesn't have any time restrictions on it like the base werewolf, so I am free to switch back and forth at will, with almost no downsides. More on that much later. It seems all vampires are not created equal, so it's time to start thinning out the lesser ones in and around the Den. Once more, I try giving them the old swipe, but again, it would probably inflict more physical damage if I tickled them, so it's back to the floating magic playstyle. I don't mind it, especially for what's about to come next, as after a few more thralls become one with the suck, I get yet another perk, and this one is a no-brainer. I take Vampiric Grip. It's a new spell that can be equipped in the left hand, and what is it, you may ask? Simply put, Force Choke, or more accurately, how we all want telekinesis spells to work in this series, as opposed to them just being the magic equivalent of a stepladder to grab objects slightly out of reach. That said, you mess around with this thing for about 2 minutes and you immediately see why they never implemented full-on psychokinesis. This shit is straight up busted and precisely what I was referring to when I said there was no way this was ever playtested. Bar like mammoths and dragons, you can just yank anything straight off the ground and then just toss it aside like it's nothing. Not only can you use this to effectively stunlock an enemy indefinitely if you just want to keep bullying them, but they will naturally take fall damage if thrown high enough, meaning you can trivialize a lot of fights thanks to the power of gravity. Trust me, you're going to see me abuse this one a lot today. After all, why not? Never going to show off this form in a video again, more than likely. May as well demonstrate how busted things can get. This, combined with life drain and an overabundance of things to pummel, gets me yet another perk point, to which I just double down on the magic side of things by snacking Unearthly Will so that all my magic costs 33% less. Against my better judgment, I began swinging again further in, to about the same effectiveness as before, except this time I was able to land a special takedown. You give your enemy a big old smooch on the cheek before putting them down for a much deserved nap. We can get a perk for this at some point that allows for this little smoochy smooch to fully restore your health. Again, blood magic is more reliable, but if I'm in a scenario where I'm surrounded by, say, bandits, I could see the benefit on landing the kill move for an instant full restore, assuming I don't mess up the input and just bitch slap them again. Before long, I fill up the chalice, partake in a tasting of the internal wine for good measure, and then return to Harkon to receive my next task of tracking down a moth priest, so we will have someone to read Serana's Elder Scroll. Before that though, I opt to do some Radiant quests. Now, before you think I have finally gone mad, it is for a good reason. By doing this first quest, which is simply heading into a cave of bandits, clearing them out, and then retrieving an old shriveled up torso, I can then access the second quest, which has me track down 2 rings, which will buff the Vampire Lord form. One of the rings increases my magic regeneration by a lot, and the other adds 20 points of damage per swing to my claws. I am going to get both, naturally, but make no mistake, the one that improves my swiping is getting equipped and never, ever removed. During my travels to get said rings, I ended up picking on the poor citizens of Riften once again. In my defense, I am just trying to go about my business. They are the ones who keep attacking me. At the very least, they prove to be good XP fodder once more, as I get yet another perk, and as I'm heading after that ring, I decide to double down on the melee side of things by acquiring Poison Talons. This now allows me to inflict 20 points of seemingly stackable poison damage per swing. Even without that ring, I have to say, this makes a huge difference for fighting up close. It was a lifesaver in fact when it came time to get the Ring of the Beast, as my luck seems to have given out as the jewellery was being held by the Falmer. Typically, fighting them at level 2 is almost a guaranteed death sentence, but I have enough ways to lay on the damage and keep them at bay that I can either stand my ground and fight, or simply cheese my way to victory through use of the Force. Something I completely forgot about the Ring of the Beast was that it also grants you an extra 100 hit points. Not that I was going to, but hard to turn down more health and damage over the other ring for just more regen and magicka. Speaking of, that ring was in a much easier location, that being Stony Creek Cave. All it had was a handful of bandits, and one dude at the end who, thanks to the Anniversary Edition, is now in possession of Ruin's Edge, the bow with the giant eyeball on it. That's like weapon design 101 right there. You want your weapon to look really goddamn cool, just slap a big old eye on it somewhere. Bonus points if it reacts and blinks while in use. I say all this, but it's not like I'm going to be using it today. It will fetch a good price though, I'm sure. Not that I have any need for money besides maybe the occasional carriage trip, so I don't have to flap my little wings all across the country. Back to the matter at hand, finding that moth priest. Despite what the name implies, we can't just catch him by setting a lamp out on a comically sized mousetrap, but instead we will need to ask some carriage drivers if they've seen him. This will then lead us to Dragon's Reach, which will in turn lead us to the site of a recent scuffle. By following the trail to a nearby cave, we can then find he is under the protection of the Dawnguard at present. So it is time for us to see about turning the hunters into the hunted. You may notice the bats swirling around me now when I enter combat. That is yet another perk I have obtained. The bats are a small area of effect around me that are present at all times that do constant damage over time to anyone within melee range. So, once more, even more benefits to getting up close and personal. Honestly, if the blood magic wasn't so reliable for perk progression, I probably would have just went full melee vampire by this point. My now overpowered melee wipes out the nameless Dawnguard in a couple of waves of my wrist, leaving only the 2 semi-important named ones left. I could stand and fight, but I would rather get a move on, so Vampiric Grip for the win yet again. This leads to a brief fight with the priest, before we enthrall him and then just have him set up shop back at Hotel Transylvania. As the Moth Priest is now madly in love with me, he agrees to read the scroll, only to be told that he in fact needs 2 more, because of course he does. The first of which is the Dragon Scroll, the one you need to get with the help of Septimus for the main quest, so I see about collecting that first, as by this stage I could probably make my way through these Dwemer ruins with my eyes closed. Rather than float straight down to the bottom, I take time to have even more fun with Vampiric Grip as I begin chucking Falmer down the shaft like I'm hurling pennies off the Eiffel Tower. The Force Fiddle unfortunately doesn't work on most of the Dwemer robots. Not that it mattered, mind you, as I was able to just slash away at the ankles of the Centurion to secure a shockingly easy win. Blackreach was as boring as ever, as one might expect, so I just hurried along to do the right to left puzzle, grab my scroll, and then skedaddle off to get the third piece of magical paper, which is conveniently located somewhere in Harkon's castle, unbeknownst to him of course. We need to reach Serana's mother's lab, but to do so, we need to fight our way through the unkept parts of the castle. What this means is some skeletons, gargoyles, feral vampires, and worst of all, again, deathhounds. Just like before, they still have way more health than anything else we've come across, and I just do not get it. Granted, I've got more than enough at my disposal to find a way to deal with them, but still, it's gonna be kinda weird if they are the only thing in this questline that's going to give us trouble. After dulling my nails on many a gargoyle, we finally make it to Valerica's alchemy room, and after grabbing the objects that stick out the most, we can smash them all together with a small helping of Serana's blood and enter the soul cairn. Last time we came here, we stayed human and had to do a partial soul trap, so we're at a mild disadvantage the entire time. This time though, since we're an undead vampire, we can just blitz our way through, abusing our powers without a care in the world. Meeting up with Mother Dearest, and to get past the dome that separates us, we need to take out 3 mini-bosses scattered around the area. You wanna take a stab at how I trivialized those battles? I'll give you a hint, it was a 2013 movie starring Sandra Bullock and George Clooney. They may have been easily cheesable, but the next encounter, not so much. It's also our first dragon fight of the run, so that's neat. Durnevere is different than your typical scuffle with the flying lizards, as he doesn't breathe fire, and instead tries to tear out your soul and summons bone men throughout the fight. Alright, so yeah, it's basically a bog standard dragon fight with some very brittle odds, but I'll take what I can get. Keeps things a little fresh. Like the rest of his kin, once his health reaches around half, he decides that the best way to deal with me is by getting up and biting me. I was shocked to discover that the decaying, undead, immortal dragon is in fact susceptible to poison damage from my claws. Works for me, I suppose. With Durnevere only mostly dead, we hurry off to the nearby room where Valerica has stashed the third and final scroll. With it in our possession, me and Serana can run back to the plot, but before that, we are stopped by Long Dead and Handsome once again. He congratulates us on our victory, and then we agree to call on him in the outside world should we need his help, as it will allow him to stretch his wings per se in somewhere that isn't a literal barren wasteland. Also, fun fact, since I came here before finding out my guy was Dragonborn, we get this very slightly altered dialogue.
Aaron is the vanquisher, the one who has bested a fellow Dova in battle. Forgive me. My instinct was to grant you this title. I am uncertain why. Perhaps one day it will become clear to both of us.
After speaking with Valerica for the first time in centuries, and after we leave the Purple Filter Realm, Serana is having second thoughts about helping her father, and suggests that we take the Elder Scrolls to the Moth Priest and just go about the whole ordeal ourselves. I mean, I agree, but Daxian was so excited at the prospect of new reading material that he has went blind from the whole process. That, or one of the vampires ate his eyes while we were gone, it's honestly hard to say. Regardless, he can't see, and due to the scrolls not being in Braille, our only option is to head to the Ancestor Glade to use the power of moths to be able to read the scrolls. Not sure how that works exactly, but this is a game where I just transported myself to a realm between life and death to fight a dragon for a magical piece of paper. Who am I to ask questions about the logistics of all of this? After reading all 3 scrolls, and possibly bleeding out of every orifice while doing so, we get the location of Uriel's bow, the plot-specific item needed, but not really, for the end of the DLC. Also occurs to me it's the first time I've mentioned this plot MacGuffin by name in this video. Whoops. Hey, remember the Dawnguard? Because despite the expansion being named after them, it sure doesn't. This small handful waiting to jump me and Serana as we leave the cave is the only other band we have come across since the ones we engaged before kidnapping the priest. And, spoiler alert, these are also the last ones we will see in this main part of the questline, as wiping them out is in fact a post-story side quest. Off to complete the penultimate quest and find that bow, we end up in Darkfall Cave. It's an appropriate name, given that I can't see shit. After meeting up with the resident snow elf, he points us on a pilgrimage we'll need to partake in if we are to open the way to the Chantry, stop his brother, and claim the bow. The Falmer, or Betrayed as he refers to them, are just lining the first part of the cave. We have come quite far since those first few we fought to get the Beast Ring. Specifically, we have the Beast Ring's damage upgrade along with the poison, which helps to even the playing field, as again, I am only level 3. Also helping matters is I don't think I have fed at all since becoming a vampire. So yes, while the longer you go without feeding, the more damage you'll take from fire, subsequently you also take less damage from all forms of frost. Considering many creatures you fight, i.e. Falmer and Draugr to name a few, love to use ice magic, it's probably in my best interests to stay like this so that I can easily soak up the cold and feel nothing. This is just a long-winded explanation of saying the Falmer don't pose much of a challenge anymore, lest a large group of them jumps me at once. When we make it to our first shrine, we transform back to elf mode to grab some of the water before reverting back and continuing on to the next. There's not much to this whole thing other than a run-in with the odd spider or Falmer. The only thing of note was when my face paint moved. No clue how that happened, but it could be a side effect of constantly switching back and forth. I have also been picking up more vampire perks along the way, just FYI. Haven't really brought attention to them as they aren't ones I'll be using very much at the moment, things like Detect Life and the Mist form, which just makes you invincible for about 10 seconds, although you cannot fight back while in the form, so it's rather situational. A few more dozen Falmer get to experience what it's like to be a flightless bird before we finally make it to the Chantry to face Archcurate Vurthur. The first phase has us fighting a bunch of frozen Falmer. Nothing different about them other than them potentially being more brittle, honestly I couldn't really tell. Fun fact, if you're in Vampire Lord form here, you can tell when he's about to escape, as the game forces you back into your normal state right before the ceiling falls on your head. Again, there are no limits to the transformation, so as soon as we wake up, we can shift right back, except we can't. Turns out we cannot do anything until Serana and Vurthur have had their little exchange. The one where Vurthur reveals the shocking twist that he is in fact a vampire. You mean the guy who is one of the final obstacles in the vampire killing DLC with the glowing red eyes is in fact a vampire? Colour me shocked. Anywho, it's time for yet another boss battle. Hey, guess what? We're outside and on the roof of this building overlooking the entire valley we just spent the last 30 minutes crossing. There's also no invisible barrier around said building. Vurthur also has nothing of value on his person, lest you want his unique armor set. So, you know. With that, we get the bow, and are all set to wrap up the DLC. Since we're already vampires and welcome in Harkon's court, we don't need to storm the castle to reach the final fight. We simply just stroll on into the room where Harkon currently is. There is some back and forth before the fight, but all you need to know is that I handed the bow over to him simply because I thought it would be funny. Oriel's bow completely trivializes the fight, as you can shut Harkon down whenever he moves to the center of the room to heal himself. With the right setup, the fight can literally be over in less than a minute. We aren't allowed to use the bow regardless today, so it's an old-fashioned slobber knocker, or at least that's what I was hoping for. Harkon appears to have gone to the Injustice 2 school of fighting, as he proceeds to just back up the entire time while throwing projectiles from as far away as possible. I can return fire the odd time, but it's honestly just more beneficial to try and cut him off and force him into melee combat. Seemingly, he doesn't have any of the perks or any kind of buff over the base version of the form, so when I close the gap, I am able to eviscerate his health bar in seconds. This, of course, forces him to retreat and start the summoning phase. Only skeletons this time, which are all easy one-shots, so nothing too fancy. This leads to the same song and dance of us floating around the room, me waiting for the opportunity to strike, and then once more inflicting enough damage that he has to bubble yet again. Things get a tad more complicated, I suppose, as now he tosses some gargoyles into the mix. But Serana has shown she can solo them, so they can't last long against the two of us. After it is dealt with, he enters the fray once more, and repeats the same strategy that failed spectacularly the first two times. Credit where it is due, I suppose, he does manage to fight back and get me dangerously close to death, but sadly for him, the extra damage and poison claws at my disposal very quickly outdamage whatever he is capable of, allowing me to come out on top. Unfortunately for me, I then decided to morph back into human mode, and due to the Ring of the Beast giving me an extra 100 hit points in the Vampire Lord form, whenever I transformed back, those extra hit points were removed, resulting in one of the most pathetic deaths I have ever witnessed. So yes, this means I had to run through the fight a second time. Alrighty, with the Dawnguard questline done and dusted, all that remained was the main quest, as after all you can't technically answer the title of the video if you don't also run through the story. Much like the werewolf counterpart, I can't imagine this recap will be particularly long-winded. After all, I am a nearly fully upgraded Vampire Lord. The basic bandits and Draugr do not stand a chance. The highlights of Bleak Falls both involved the Vampiric Grip spell. The first was when I tried to toss the wounded frostbite spider back from whence it came, and the second being the outright embarrassing death at the end of dungeon boss, who fell like 6 feet and died. Taking the plot rock to Farengar, it's time for the first yet actually second dragon encounter. Naturally, what I was most concerned about was the fire breath. Don't particularly have any countermeasures for that other than praying my resistances and weaknesses cancel each other out, and that I can just tank the damage. That's kind of what happened, I suppose. Don't misunderstand me, Murmelnir still nearly roasted my wings off, but he only managed to bring me down to half by doing so. I, on the other hand, was able to close the gap and start abusing the overpowered claws and poison once more. Like everything else up until now, this was enough to rapidly eat through his remaining health, securing me the victory. And I do mean just me. Earlith and the guards? Well, they turned on me the moment I absorbed the dragon's soul. They were injured enough from the fight that I was able to pick off all the nameless soldiers with a single blood magic blast, and then knock down Earlith in a similar fashion. I was smart enough to transform out of sight when the fight began, so they have no idea that this was me. So once I create some space, I can revert back and safely travel to Whiterun to begin the next leg of the journey up to High Hrothgar. The fastest way to go about all of this would have been to travel from the Redwater Den, as it's close to Ivarstead. I did not do that, but instead decided to take the route from Whiterun, simply because there's at least 2 different groups of bandits and a few giants I can deal with on the way, which should help me max out the perk tree, as by this point I was only missing 2 perks. In fact, I got one of them when taking out that group that has a blind man on watch. The final spell I unlocked was Corpse Curse. It's a paralyzed spell, plain and simple. It's got a rather hefty duration as well. In combination with the Vampiric Grip spell, it lets us have even more fun with just throwing people around. It's also harmless too, as they won't take fall damage while paralyzed. Pretty sure that's not how that works, but I'll allow it because it's funny. For what it's worth, I did secure the kill after the spell wore off. I also decided to really show just how busted the Vampiric Grip spell was, as it turns out it also works on giants. Gonna be honest, I just figured it wouldn't given their size. I assumed they were exempt, like dragons and mammoths. Well, as it does, I can just give this one a gentle shove off a nearby cliff and be done with him. As for his friend, I circle and slash until he bled out and the poison replaced what was once in his veins. Continuing on my way, and I was impressed with the second set of bandits. Not because they were a threat or anything, but because the one out front had the absolute balls to ask this horrifying creature of the night for toll money. Naturally, I paid the fine as I am an upstanding citizen. Her friends weren't so lucky, mind you, but still. After all this killing, would you believe that a random rat that approached me on the road ended up being the final life essence required for the last Vampire Lord perk? The final perk is one that I actually mentioned before. It's the one that if I manage to pull off the heavy takedown, I get a full heal. Like I said, it could be very powerful, but I've just never seen the point in getting it up until this point. And spoiler alert, I think it might only come in handy like twice from this point on. Regardless, that's the Vampire Lord as strong as it's going to get. The mountain climbing adventure was the same as usual, although I'd be lying if I said messing with this particular frost troll wasn't an incredibly cathartic experience. With the amount of Skyrim runs I've completed at this point, I think it's fair to say he is now the one being picked on more as opposed to myself. Arriving at High Hrothgar and the Greybeards give me a rather warm welcome, too warm as a matter of fact. I had the foresight to save prior to entering the building, should the crazy elderly mountain hermits judge me on my appearance, so I can go back to elf mode, steamroll through the training, and then be off to collect the magic conch shell. Although it was at this exact moment that I just realised something. I never went and finished off the Dawnguard. Can't have a Vampire Lord run without me wiping out the vampire hunters, can we? Well, to gain access to the culling, I need to do a few more Radiant quests because of course you do. I won't bore you with the details, just a lot of going to places and either biting people or clearing out caves of feral vampires. Despite their entire existence being devoted to the swift eradication of vampires, they were surprisingly unprepared to face down even a single one. Yeah, sure, I'm like a Super Saiyan vampire, but still, you'd think they'd have a contingency plan for this. The only one who seemed mildly prepared was Florentius, by which I mean he tried to exploit my weakness to fire by unleashing his flamethrower hands. It didn't work in the long run, but I had to recognise that he at least tried. I did get a sick combo on Durak, which was the highlight of the trip. Tossed him into the air with a grip, and then shot him on the way down with a health drain for the kill. The fall would have done the job for sure, but sometimes you gotta add a little spice, you know. As for Isran, their illustrious leader got absorbed straight into my bloodstream like a bottle of Magners on a hot day. And with that, so ends the Dawnguard. An adversary so unremarkable that their own storyline forgets about them, and even the quest to wipe them off the map is an afterthought for the vampires. Alright, time to get horny, by which I of course mean we are trekking through Ustengrav to collect the horn of Jurgen Windcaller. Due to not leveling up at all since I began the main plot, the bandits, Draugr, skeletons, and even spiders are no more deadly than those that we fought in Bleak Falls Barrow. I did try to use my supernatural reflexes power to slow down time and walk through the whirlwind sprint part of the dungeon. By the way, that's something I can do now. Alas, despite being more than quick enough, the game refused to budge. Weirdly, this was the most disappointed I've been about something in one of these games in a while, and I don't know why. Anyway, we don't get the horn, we do meet Delphine, and then we go off to face down yet another dragon. I've mentioned before, but Saloknir is by far the easiest mandatory dragon fight ever. The simple fact that you can damage him while he is stuck in his resurrecting animation makes this fight completely free. Even when he attempts to fight back this time, he for some reason uses Frost Breath. Something I only take half damage from due to the fact I am a very thirsty vampire at this current moment in time. Now, just like the dragon fight outside of Whiterun, Delphine does now want my head for simply being a vampire. Thankfully, by turning back and lowering my fists, she will accept my surrender and will not report me to the town guards. Embassy up next, and when it comes to handing my essentials over to Malborn, the only thing I give him is the Ring of the Beast. I imagine from his perspective this must seem incredibly bizarre, but it is literally all I'll ever need. I must don clothes now for the first time in this entire run. Technically not against the rules, as it's not like they even offer any protection, but still, I thought the naked vampire thing was funny. I'm immature like that, I suppose. Once we get into the back of the embassy, we primarily stick to the claws. Not just because they have been doing work and I don't need to absorb life essence anymore, but because I know if I switch to using magic, they will more than likely just counter that with a ward spell. None of them carry any type of physical shield, so they are pretty much hopeless of stopping a frontal assault like this. This also goes for poor Malborn, who got caught up in the chaos at the end as he saw me as a threat. With the embassy out of the way, it was on to the Ratway tunnels.
Kill him.
I don't care if it's cheap. I'm having fun. Alduin's Wall is like a 2-minute quest, seeing how all you need to do is run through 2 of the simplest Fisher-Price puzzles ever concocted before being told to head back to the Greybeards to learn Dragonrend. So while that may be a little boring, allow me to draw your attention to possibly one of the most satisfying dragon kills I have had the pleasure of capturing on camera. Not only was I able to knock the blood dragon out of the sky with a well-aimed spell, but as his health was low enough, this caused him to do the animation where he crashes into the ground, which in this case just so happened to be right back into his own grave where I then dealt the killing blow. Well, I fear I have peaked when it comes to dragon kills in Skyrim. To the Greybeards once more, but it's only a flying visit as what we are really after is their boss on the top of the mountain. I let him ramble on for a bit about Elder Scrolls before just informing him that I already have one. Well, 3 if we're being honest. We watch yet another unskippable cutscene involving Alduin, and then prepare ourselves for what will no doubt be the toughest, or at the very least, longest fight thus far. It's not a matter of damage that is my concern, but rather the constant switching back and forth between elf and vampire form, as for the first half of his health bar, Alduin will only take damage after he has been grounded with Dragonrend. Naturally, I cannot use Dragonrend while a Vampire Lord, so the fight consists of me blasting him out of the sky, waiting for him to land so I can hit him again so he stays down for as long as physically possible, and then transforming and getting as much damage as I can on him before Dragonrend wears off and he takes to the skies once again. Unlike most dragons, Alduin has access to both Frost and Fire Breath, so you'll just use whichever one is more effective. This, in conjunction with the near constant fireballs falling out of the sky, leads to me taking way more damage than I could have hoped to heal through. This also makes the matter of switching back to use Dragonrend difficult, as much like the aftermath of the fight with Harkon, if I swap back while my health is low enough, I will just drop like a sack of spuds. If my health did get low enough, typically it was just more worth my time to load back to the start of the fight and try again. The saving grace was the wall that Parthenax likes to sit on when he chats with you, as circling it gives you good cover from both Alduin and the fireballs. Eventually, I get him to below half, and at that point, the fight is basically over, as I no longer need to worry about form switching, and can then just hit him with more spells, before finishing him off by using supernatural reflexes and just a whole bunch of clawing. Peace Council's up now, so nothing new there, but in between I went off to do the Hersing quest with Sinding. Felt it would be fun to fight a werewolf as a vampire lord. The hunt for the white stag part of the quest was a tad underwhelming. Not only did some nameless bandits happen upon it before me, but I think I may have instantly snapped its neck by yanking it too hard with a vampiric grip. Sadly, that wasn't the only disappointing part of this side journey. For whatever reason, and no matter how many times I loaded back or if I killed all the other hunters first, Sinding just sort of refused to really try and defend himself, so it wasn't so much a fight as it was me putting down a sick dog. Pity. Oh well, time to ride my invisible dragon off to Skyrim so that I may confront Alduin one final time. I believe this happened because the courier dragged me into a conversation in the middle of the animation of me climbing aboard Odaving, causing the game to just break for a moment. Skyrim, more dragons and low-level draugrs. Sovngarde, soon may hit like a truck, but perhaps in future he will not begin the fight right next to the Spirit World's equivalent of the Grand Canyon. Final battle, and fortunately for me, the Warriors 3 do not care that I am a Vampire Lord. Honestly, it's about time somebody saw the bigger picture, and as such, I am free to switch back and forth without a care in the world. Speaking of, I only need to do that twice, as the immortal backup assists in beating Alduin up enough that he doesn't get the chance to get back off the ground. We then all sorta just dogpiled him to the point where he couldn't really decide who to go after, leading to a quick and decisive win. I then hit a little vampire dance to celebrate, returned to the land of the living, scaring the absolute shit out of the dragons, causing them to flee, thus finishing the game, and proving yes, you can indeed beat Skyrim as a vampire lord. Fun times. I believe this is only the second ever time I have messed around as the vampire lord. The only other time being when I was doing it to round up the last few achievements for the special edition. Goes without saying that it is substantially better than the werewolf transformation, if not just for having ranged capabilities, but that damn vampiric grip spell. It really is just that good. It's basically an instant kill on anything that isn't a dragon or a mammoth, which is kinda absurd for something you can get at level 1 if you play your cards right. Regardless, that's going to be the end of this challenge video. If you enjoyed what you saw, consider giving the video a like. If you're interested in more challenges in the future, feel free to subscribe. I'm trying to run these videos out fairly frequently. My name's Nerbit, stay safe everyone, I'll see y'all in the next video.